How's it going, everybody? And welcome to a very allergic edition of Push Start to Listen. I had to do this on Saturday night instead of Friday night like I normally do because it seems like everything I own is completely coated in pollen, and my allergies have just quite literally drained everything out of me. This is as bad as it has been in a good many years, and the store brand Claritin knockoff that I am using is just not really saving me for much of anything. But we got a few things to talk about this week. I want to give my thoughts on the new Mass Effect Legendary Edition, as well as a couple of game announcements, so why don't we get right into it? So it wasn't too terribly long ago in one of the many Nintendo Directs you get throughout the year where they announced the next Mario Golf game, Mario Golf Super Rush. Let's edit out that sneeze there. So this past week, they announced the full roster for the game, which I have right here. Why don't we go through it? Mario, Luigi, Wario, Waluigi, Princess Peach, Daisy, Yoshi, Bowser and Bowser Jr., Boo, Donkey Kong, Rosalina, Pauline, Toad, Chargin' Chuck, and King Babam. Actually, pretty good lineup. You know, pretty much everybody you would assume would be in there, plus a nice few additions of kind of out of left field stuff. I like the idea of the King Babam and the Chargin' Chuck and something a little bit different. The reason why I want to bring this up is because I think a lot of people were really excited about this game when it got announced. The same way that I feel a lot of people were really excited when the last Mario Tennis game was announced, and I was one of them. I always really liked the Mario sports games. The one that's near and dearest to me is Toadstool Tour, the GameCube golf game. I played that game quite a bit, and as a childhood kind of nostalgic memory, it's actually a game my dad played with me a little bit as well, and he wasn't really one to play a lot of games with me. So it always holds a special place, but I just always really like the Mario sports games. I like sports games in general. I like Mario. I like the lighthearted approach to the sports games because we don't really get those crazy off-the-walls arcadey games anymore. We had a little bit with the NBA Street games, NFL Street, stuff like that, but it's few and far between, especially these days. It's been a while. Those were really staples of kind of the PS2 and the Xbox era. So what I wanted to bring up is the amount of excitement that this game is causing, and it's true that it should make people excited because I'm sure it's going to be a very fun game, but I think there's a lesson to be learned about the way that the last Mario Tennis game was. That game was brutally difficult. A lot of the game was held behind the single-player story mode, for lack of a better term, which had some very, very rough challenges in it that you needed to complete to further the game and unlock what you needed to unlock to kind of have a full experience. The gameplay was pretty simplistic as well. I did enjoy it from a gameplay perspective. I tried to play as much of the game as I could, but it got to a point where I just wasn't good enough to keep progressing in the game and unlocking more and more. There's nothing really like at glance that makes it seem like it's going to be the same way with Super Mario Golf Super Rush. I apologize. It doesn't, you know, jump out immediately like, hey, this is going to be this incredibly difficult game and all this stuff is going to be tied behind all these unlocks, but it does seem like it could certainly fall into that trap. The Mario sports games, since I would say the Wii, have had kind of diminishing returns. They haven't been at the strength that they once were, you know, GameCube and previous. So I am excited about the game, but it's excitement with a lot of trepidation. There's a lot of focus on multiplayer. I don't play games multiplayer, but that's a personal thing. You know, that's not going to affect everybody, but it does affect me. And, you know, part of this is me giving my my opinion from my personal position on stuff. And so for me, it has a little bit less excitement than it would for maybe you, which is fine. You know, maybe it's just not for me. Maybe it's for somebody else. But I hope that Nintendo can get back to where it once was with their sports games, because the sports games market could use some excitement, could use something that's kind of shaking things up. The off-the-walls arcade style gameplay is sorely missing, and I hope that the Mario sports games going forward could fulfill that. If only we could get maybe another entry in the Striker series. So not a ton of news this week. Thankfully, nothing negative to have to talk about, so that gives me some opportunity to talk about what I've playing, which I like to do from time to time. I don't do it every week because sometimes I'm just playing the same thing for weeks at a time, and it would be boring to talk about it ad nauseum. But last week, the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which is the remaster of Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 came out, and I was honestly on the fence of getting it. Mass Effect 2 is one of my all-time favorite games. I love that game to death. I've played it from start to finish multiple times. I absolutely love it, and I initially thought, like, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to play through 1, 2, and 3 again when this remaster comes out. Now, Mass Effect 3, I don't have the time to get into my feelings on that game. suffice it to say, the easiest thing I could say is it is the most disappointed I've ever been in a video game in my life. I don't think another game will ever be able to top it unless something really, really goes off the rails. But when you love something as much as I loved Mass Effect 2, and then you get what Mass Effect 3 was as not only a follow-up, but a conclusion to that story, it was not good, and it really brought BioWare to its knees, and they honestly haven't recovered since. And that's not all their fault. EA played a big part of it, but I decided, you know what, I haven't played Mass Effect 3 since it came out. I'm ready to go. Let's do this. Then a few months ago, or maybe not even a few months ago, a few weeks ago even, my wife, who decided to start playing video games as a hobby, I've talked about that a few times, she decided to pick up Mass Effect 2. And I sat there and watched her play a little bit of it, and then I started to realize, like, I don't think I'm ready to actually go back and play all these games right now. So I decided not to pick it up. But last Saturday, I was bored. I was very bored. I was on my PlayStation 5 dashboard, and I saw the icons for the show and PGA Tour 2K21, two sports games, and I was like, you know what? I have got to play something that is not a sports game right now. I need something with some story. I need something where maybe I'm shooting instead of hitting something. Or hitting a ball with a club or a bat. And so I pulled the trigger and downloaded the Legendary Edition, got it all up and running, and I decided to jump into Mass Effect 1. Now, I never finished Mass Effect 1. At the time, I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, so it was a rental. I rented it for a week. I got as far into it as I could, but it just wasn't enough to get me back in. But for whatever reason, Mass Effect 2 came out, and I jumped in with both feet and absolutely loved it. Like I said, one of my favorite games of all time. So getting to play Mass Effect again has been really refreshing, and I'm at the point, I'm about 6 or 7 hours in. I certainly still remember everything I'm doing, so I obviously played more than this. I didn't give up on it so fast, but I really, really like what they did with it. It looks good. Obviously the animations are still pretty janky. Mass Effect in general, the animations were always janky. So I'm not really worried about that, but it looks great blown up on a big TV in 4K. No performance issues whatsoever. The cut down on load times is fantastic. I really can't say enough positive things about what they did with at least Mass Effect 1. Obviously I haven't finished the game, so I haven't gone into playing the remastered 2 and 3, but I know what those games look like. I've played them. They don't really need to do too much with that. But the first Mass Effect, they were really pushing hard with that game. That was really kind of hitting the boundaries of what the Xbox 360 was capable of when that came out. So it's been really nice to play it 100% smoothly, no issues whatsoever. I'm really, really enjoying it. There's some elements of the gameplay that are certainly antiquated. The whole Mako thing is a disaster. I wish they could have just removed it entirely because it is such a chore. The lack of kind of knowing where you're going. There is a map system, but I think we've been spoiled in years since with map systems like in the new Resident Evil, where it says like, hey, you've been in this room, or hey, you haven't been in this room, or at least just like that ping in Mass Effect 2 and 3 where you click in the stick and the arrow points in the direction that you're supposed to go. So there's been a few times in Mass Effect so far over the past week where I've just been fairly lost. Not bad enough that I needed to like look up a guide to figure out where I was going, but it definitely was like, oh, I guess I totally missed this corner I was supposed to go down, which is fine. I guess another complaint I have, and it's not really a major complaint, it could just be my television. My TV's, it's not that old, but it's starting to kind of lose some of its luster, if you know what I mean, is the game is really dark. I've adjusted the HDR settings, I've adjusted the brightness, and it's just straight dark. And there are times where I legitimately cannot tell that, like, hey, I'm actually supposed to continue walking down this hallway because it just looks black. It just looks like a wall. It looks like you can't go down any further, which leads to me just constantly having to pause the game and check the map, and it gets a little, a little tedious, I guess. But when you're not indoors in, like, a tunnel or something, it's not a problem at all. There are no issues when you're outside or even in a well-lit interior of a building. No problems. Like walking around the Citadel is perfectly fine. But if you're on the fence of picking it up, or if you've never played Mass Effect, do it. Those games are amazing. I'm really curious to see what they did with 3, not in terms of like what they added to the game or how they made it look, but simply because the Legendary Edition of the trilogy comes with all the DLC, and I was so frustrated with 3 that when I was finished, I took it that day and traded it in. I didn't bother playing any of the DLC, and I know they've corrected some of the stuff, stuff with the DLC, some of the problems, not all of them, but some of them. There is no multiplayer to Mass Effect 3, which for me is great. I get that a lot of people really like the multiplayer in that game. For me, it wasn't my thing, but there was a whole part of the game in the single player that was tied in to making progress in the multiplayer that really, really rubbed me the wrong way. So I'm glad that that's not something you have to worry about. I'm excited to play through. It's going to be interesting. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through Mass Effect 2. I'm going to have to because I do want to experience Mass Effect 3 again, but I feel like it's just too soon for Mass Effect 2. I want to say that the last time I finished the game, we're in 2021, so probably 2018, so 3 years ago, roughly, was the last time I finished that game, and then just seeing my wife play it, a few weeks ago, and just immediately remembering everything she had to do, everywhere she had to go. I could walk in and within like 10 seconds, I could be like, oh, you're on this mission, you have to go do that, So it's still so fresh in my mind because it is such a loved game for me. But I'm very excited to play through the games again, and certainly going to give me a lot to do this summer. And that's going to wrap it up for this week. As always, I want to thank you for hanging out and watching Push Start to Listen. It does mean a lot to me. I always try to do some general housekeeping at the end and talk about what's going on with the channel. Unfortunately, nothing to update this week. I initially had planned to get the next mainline Push Start series video out this coming Monday. It's not going to happen. We had a family event this weekend that caused us to just I don't have the time to do it, quite frankly. And then the allergies. It's been really, really difficult. It's almost done. It should be up next Monday, a week from this coming Monday. I've already got the next 2 videos planned and ready to go. I've already captured footage for the one after this. So we're rolling. Obviously, I'm never going to be, I say never, who knows? As of right now, I'm not going to be on a weekly schedule or even a bi-weekly schedule. But for me, the progress is I have ideas for videos X, Y, and Z. I am making preparations to film and edit and complete videos X, Y, and Z, and that's what's important to me. So yeah, they don't come out on a super regular basis, but they are coming out, and that's what's important to me. So once again, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll be right back here next week for another episode of Push Start to Listen.